Project Tzointykrator, a journey into speculative biology. The early Oculaerian era, 300 to 266 million years ago. The era began with its namesake, animals evolving eyes, as the oceans began to fill with rhodophyta. The first eyes would evolve in anime vertebrates, that is, the mobile plankton. The first eyes would then after evolve in pulmoniotes, however, for the reason of being able to detect solar flares and then retreat back into their shells for safety. Soon, fins would evolve in Oculaerians, and then jaws, evolving from Lithovermiote tongues. The algae would then invade the land, around the coast, as can be seen on the map to the right. Hexapods, that is the six-limbed Lithovermiota, and the tetraurae, that is those with four fins, which would become ray-like rather than limb-like. As the ages go on and more algae is on the land, it begins to rot and die. As with each solar flare, the top layer dies, used as fertilizer for the next layer. Because of the amount of methane being pumped into the air, not only that but oxygen, the methane and oxygen counteract each other in order to regulate the atmospheric temperature. Mounds of fungus begin to grow and feast upon the algae, curtailing it, known as fungitures. And following these two food sources, algae and fungus, the first jawless monoculae clamber on land near the end of the early Oculaerian. Diversification of Staphylos vermiotes. Evolving from basal planktonic vermiotes, in Monophytus primigeneus, that which was once the digestive system is now reservoirs of water. The heart has become a hydraulic pump for the tail, which now filled with rhodophyta is the photosynthetic leaf structure, complete with a light-sensing gonad. The tongue now grips the ocean floor like roots, and bristling stems come out of the gonads to catch gametes from other plants. Unibarkia tenerifolia is the first of the Staphylos to have bark, which is used to protect itself from solar flares. When the eye senses a solar flare, the hydraulic pump pulls the photosynthetic leaf tail back into shell. Protohydra Staphylos no longer has symmetry and is a fully stationary plant analog for Tzointykrator. While they go extinct in the water due to anoxic conditions from algae blooms, they'll soon dominate the dry land. Don't be fooled. Despite their appearance, these are in fact animals, having evolved from plankton, filled with rhodophyta, like our gut bacteria. Instead of using it to digest matter, as we would, they digest sunlight. However, plant analogs are not the only things evolving on Tzointykrator, as in the ocean, the vermiotes continue. Starting with Vermiota, that is, the subspecies with fins, which would evolve into the terrestrial monoculae we will soon see. They evolve into Lithovermiota, that is, vermiotes which, having teeth on the top and an extension of their mouth, grip things with their bristled tongues and drag them across the top, cutting them to bits. Soon, their eyes would split and have several different light-sensing areas. Prohexapoda, that being those with 6 fins, and Pseudobignatho, those having 4, would evolve two different jaw-like strategies. One, the Pseudobignatho, would preserve one stem of the tongue to be a tongue and the other to be a jaw, soon having bone around it forming a beak in the tetraurae. Prohexapods would have very muscular tongues which would clamp down and grip things, eventually evolving a net to keep the food inside of the mouth, having a 3-way jaw by the time the 277 million years ago reached with the Alphatrignatho. To the left, we can see a basal Oculaerian organ system, purple being the reproductive system, green the cardiovascular system, blue the respiratory system, red the digestive system, orange the nervous system, a primitive eye, as well as a primitive brain. The tongue would drag the food into the mouth, where it would then, by a force of the diaphragm, be pulled into the stomach, acidify, dissipate into the heart to energize it, and then the waste matter come out of the intestines. The heart would pump fertilized and oxygenated blood, energized by ATP throughout the system, and being oxygenated by the two lungs, which could take in either air or water depending on the need. Oculaevermiotes, unlike some of their later descendants such as hexapods and Pteroraei, were both male and female. In their courtship rituals, the loser would get pregnant. The internal penis would come out, fertilize the gonad bristles, which would then pull the gametes in, and from the base, which is inside of the organ system itself, grow pups, which would then come out live through the mother and grow themselves into an adult creature. Over time, the tongues used by carnivorous Gnathovermiota to grab and grind prey against their upper mouth would gradually be mounted further into the skull and calcify into bones, the first jaws. Pteroraei have 2 eyes and 1 jaw, whereas hexapoda have 3 eyes and 2 jaws, with a membrane connecting the two to keep food within the mouth. At the bottom right, you can see the skeletal structures of Pteroraei, hexapods, and common monoculae. Diversification of pulmoniotes. In the oceans, the brown oceans full of sand, mud, algae, and the gray sky, gray-yellow from the red dwarf's light, larger plankton, pulmoniotes, filter feed near the surface of the water. Large nectonic pulmoniotes, such as Cetocardium, filter feed off the large amounts of rhodophyta algae in the water. They have no natural predators. Small nectonic pulmoniotes are hunted by Pteroraei. Small planktonic pulmoniotes are the victims of monoculae. And near the ocean floor, barnacles or Monopholnus balanus filter feed out of the sand. They are hunted by bottom-feeding hexapods such as this Balanophagus. Tzointykrator's landscape, 275 million years ago. Terrestrial rhodophyta covers the land. The colonies of algae share water among the various cells, and the surface layers die off during the daily solar flares, creating a fertile soil bed which will someday turn into fossil fuels. Fungitures are large fungal mounds which feast upon the massive layers of dead and dying algae. Their thick wooden bark protects them from the radiant sun. Soon, limbs would evolve in certain species of monoculae, starting with Algipias chlorophora, which would live in the tidal pools eating algae. Since they could already breathe air, when they would be beached and shown up on land, as the tide retreated, they would eventually pull themselves around on their fins, eventually evolving into limbs, and then becoming upright. Towards the end of the early Oculaerian and Orthopteris salatrix, a rabbit-like creature hopping around, gulping up algae. The first jawless monoculae came to land by being washed up in the tide, as the ocean began to be overflowed with algae. The vermiotes of Tzointykrator evolved for their lungs to breathe air, as well as water. Thus pulmoniotes slowly suffocated into extinction in the anoxic waters being filled with algae. The beached monoculae eventually hauled themselves around on their fins as they ate up algae. These eventually became limbs, and soon they began to diversify into 2 main branches, that being Algivora and Fungivora. Algivora hop around on the forest floor, gulping up algae with their tongues and digging burrows with their shovel-like toes. Absolutely naked, Algivora must find shelter during solar flares or else be irradiated beyond repair. Their rear toes do the hopping, with the middle toe being a weight-bearing hoof, and the third toe being a sharp claw, digging elaborate tunnels, and in the carnivorous species, a dangerous weapon. Fungivora evolved originally to climb up the fungal towers that make up the early Oculaerian forest. Over time, they went from falling to gliding to flying, and now fly across the woods, scraping off bark from Fungitures with their beaks and bringing it into their mouths with their tongues. Since their bodies are covered in warts, which at one point were an affliction, now they have harnessed the power of cancerous tissue in order to use benign tumors as protection from the radiant sun. While their naked young live in nest, carved with talons into the side of large fungus, the adults are covered in a thick layer of sensory hairs, and beneath them warty armor. The bones at the end of the tail, which for now move about to change its shape in order to maneuver through the air, will eventually evolve into grasping hands and effectively a third limb. In the next episode, the Middle Oculaerian Era, we will detail the evolution of hexapods as they journey onto land and the diversification of the Fungivora and Algivora, and their megafaunal forms therein. Until next time, this has been Somber Whimsy. Thank you for watching.